Hello there. My name is Vuyo Joboda. I am a global media maven, and I am so excited to welcome you to Media Mondays, of course. And as we start off this brand new year, knowing, fully understanding that there's so many of you who are looking forward and who are interested in the concept and in the idea of content creation, but also about getting involved within the media space in various capacity. And what I'll be doing over the next couple of Mondays is engaging with you and some of the fundamentals to know and fundamentals to uncover about media. Right. And as I said earlier on, I'm a global media maven with over a decade experience within the industry, from radio to television to digital content, producing, directing, and of course, serving as executive producer for a number of different shows, both in South Africa and around the world. But I've also had the absolute honor and opportunity to work with multiple content creators across the years. And I've, from the various different platforms that I've created and I've built, from VN Streaming to the VN Global Summit, to the YBB Awards, etc., etc. I've had the pleasure of sitting down and engaging with so many creatives, and I understand some of the struggles that creators have within the content creation space and the media space in general. I've also graduated from the University of Cape Town, which is Africa's highest ranking university, with an undergrad degree in television and film and television studies and media and media and writing. So it really encompasses a lot of what I've done and what I am continuing to do. I'm currently based in New York City now. And I'm kind of working on a number of different projects that are all media related. So I am in a position to be able to serve you this information and some of the things that I've learned, some of the things that I would like to share with you, and some of the things that I believe are fundamental for us to know. Because I know a lot of you have had starting a podcast, putting together a show or recording or filming that particular episode, or even your own film, right? There's so many, a lot of us are looking forward to starting this brand new year and just beginning. But oftentimes we just don't know how, and so I'm hoping that you're gonna get some valuable and fundamental tools from this particular installment. The first thing I wanted to discuss, and it's so funny how over the years, the term production and the term content have kind of intersected now, where we are seeing that when we are discussing and talking about television productions or film productions or even short form digital, productions, we often put all of that under the umbrella of content. And now, when one thinks of content, there's all of these different facets of what content fundamentally is, right? And there's all these different categories that content all falls under. And initially, one would say that was what, for the longest time, the word production meant, right? And now it's content creation instead of it being production, or content as a form has kind of been utilized to explain various different types of productions. Right? And I still have my traditional norms of how I understand media. I kind of use the term production still quite a lot. And when kind of discussing or anticipating or really having conversations about the content, I kind of speak of it from a production point of view. But most importantly, I think we are now in a time where there is normality to content creation. There is access to content creation like never before. But I do think that we still need to be very cognizant of some of the valuable things that were and did and still continue to fall under production. I think that if we are disregarding the fundamentals of production, we then disregard the essence of what content as a umbrella, not just within these different formats, but as an umbrella could potentially be. So I'm hoping that in this year, we're going to take the concept of content creation and really kind of see it from a bit of a in-depth length than it just being content, right? But understanding what in essence it is meaning in this current time and in the future to come. So we need to be very, very cognizant of that going forward. And I think my understanding of production, and I want to emphasize on how we can merge these two, really put them in the same context. When speaking of content creation, we speak of it and consider it as a production from a production standpoint, right? And understanding that as we're going into the future, this is our future. Content creation is the future. It's even the term used in the future. So how do we then structure it? How do we give it essence? How do we give it value? That it's not just another post, right? But that there's so much, that there's much put into it, and that there's much considered within it that is sustainable for the industry that we are looking to create now and going forward. Now, there are things that I think, there are stages to production that I think we are missing now, right? Within the content creation vicinity, we are missing those fundamental stages of production. There are 6 particular stages of production I'll be sharing with you in this particular installment, and why those are all important. But I also want to start from just unpacking us understanding the depth of what content creation or digital content creation or production or media, and just in essence of what it is, social media, how we are not, I'm not sure if we are fully aware of the power in which social media content creation production has among society. It's one of the most powerful tools for messages to be transcribed, to messages to be sent forward to people, for people to then receive messages in a way that's palatable to their understanding. But most importantly, that we are creating structures and frameworks for information, for entertainment, for various different reasons. And one could kind of, debate of what are the reasons why content is created. But at the essence and at the core, this particular thing has a lot of influence in the world, has a lot of influence to individuals. So how are we then ensuring that this responsibility that we have as content creators is one of substance and one of value? That we're not just doing it for the sake of doing it, but we're doing it with purpose, and we're doing it from an understanding that this has influence and power, and it could change, and it could influence, and it could impact someone's life. So I think it's important to kind of consider it that way. And in a future session, I will unpack what media means, and what media really encompasses, and what the history of media really, and understanding where it comes from, and where it was, and how it got to where it is today, and the evolution of it. But what I wanted to focus on today was a lot of us right now, as we are starting this brand new year, right? It's the 1st of January, so we are starting a brand new year. A lot of us have all these ideas of the type of content that we are looking to create this year, right? So you might have a campaign lined up, and you might have a project that you're looking to do. But I think there's a part within the timeline, or rather the phases that we are continuously skipping as content creators, and that for me is the ideation phase. And the ideation phase comes before all the 6 other stages that I mentioned a little bit earlier on, that are fundamental to any production according to my point of view. But this ideation phase, we do not necessarily spend time in, and I think it's so essential for us to start looking into, if we are making content creation a sustainable industry, we need to also kind of take and borrow what traditional production values and traditional production standards are, in order for us to make content creation an industry that's worth value. So the ideation phase for me is the most important, and I think I spend a lot of time in this phase for any production, for any for any production that I do, that I produce, that I'm part of, that I am directing, that I am involved in, that I've produced or created. I find ideation thoroughly important, and I'm going to be sharing what questions we should be asking ourselves within the ideation phase in this segment and in this installment. And I'm hoping that you're going to be jotting these questions down and be able to ask yourselves these questions, so that as you're creating your production, you are fully capable and fully aware of some of those fundamental things that you should know and be cognizant of as you're about to start your 6-phase process, that you are starting the six phases process with a clear idea of what you're doing, with a clear idea of what content you're trying to create and why you're trying to create that content. So these are the 6 questions that I want you to ask yourself with this brand new idea that you have, with this podcast idea that you have, that you're looking to start. I know a lot of us are, as we podcasting is the a content format of the future. We are going to see a growth of it exponentially in the year 2024. So as we are beginning and starting this podcast, we should be asking ourselves these questions, right? The first question you should ask yourself is, what is the idea? The question, what is the idea, and what really am I trying to communicate with this idea? And it kind of different questions or different things can come out of that. So what is the idea, and kind of really sussing out the idea within full context, and fully being aware of what exactly you're trying to communicate with this idea or with this particular content piece. So there's also, I think, why we also find ourselves now in a space of just linger within the types of content that we are creating is because we do not even know what exactly the podcast or the show or the content is about, and what it's meant to say, and what it's meant to do, and what is it aiming people do. Like, what is the type of content that you're doing trying to make people do, or trying to make your listeners or the viewers do, right? And I've taken this exercise and I asked myself when I was creating the Vuyo Joboda show, which is a global podcast, sharing daily dose of global goodness, was what do I want my viewers to get out of this conversation, to get out of this particular episode? And really, the idea and the premise of the show is for audiences to have and to start envisioning themselves from a global mindset. Being global as a concept is a mindset, and the show in itself is to enable people to then start empowering themselves with a global mindset and start making global decisions for their brands, for their businesses, for their travel destinations, for what they want to do, for also aspirational purposes. What are other people around the world doing? And we're sharing all of that about the term global on the show. So what I want my people to be able to do is to go from that episode to go and start planning a vacation trip to the Maldives. I want to, a viewer to start thinking about, how do I start selling my products overseas to a different country? How do I start creating content for people in another country? How do I, like, those are the types of questions that I want my audiences to start envisioning and thinking about, or doing after watching an episode of the show. So really, I think it's a question that is very important. What do I want the people watching or listening to then do after listening and watching? And also, what really is this idea? And also then, what format do I want this particular idea? So after understanding what the idea is, and understanding what the idea is meant to serve and meant to do, then also knowing what format that particular idea, and I think knowing what will enable the then following formatting. The formatting comes after the fully fledged, fully conceptualized concept of the idea, right? So what the idea is. And then the formatting comes secondary. And I say that because once you have the idea, and once you've thought about the idea, and once you've considered the idea, you've thought about what's at the core of the content, like what's at the core of the podcast, then it's very much easier to then understand, okay, so for this particular idea to get to these types of people, or to get to that particular, then I know what formatting I need to put it in. And I'll make an example once again after Vuyo Joboda show. It's a global show, right? And it was a very deliberate thing to create it within the format that it's in, simply and mainly because it's meant to reach global audiences and people from all around the world. So it's important, and knowing and understanding, and there are a couple of different content formats that one should consider as they are thinking and kind of planning on what formatting this particular idea can fall under, right? There's television in which you can format the show in. So that could be from a series to different types of genres in television, a television movie, a television show or series, like whatever that falls under the television category. And we're going to be unpacking that, what TV is and all of that within this, the next couple of weeks. But there's television, there is film, which you can, there's short film, there's documentary film, there's long form film, there's feature film rather, there's indie films. What type of film do you want it to be, but also do you want it to be film first and foremost, right? Well, whatever you're trying to say and whatever you're trying to communicate or whatever you're trying your audiences to do, will it be best communicated in a film, right? The next one being literature. And I think this one is the one that a lot of people don't have conversations about, but I believe that literature falls under content. And I say that purely because content is something that could be stored, something that could be uh, put together, right? And it can serve to then be elongated along the years, and it can serve to share information, share insights, tell stories. Like that's what literature really does, right? To give insight, to share information, to give inspiration, to tell stories, and various different genres, of course, of literature. But in essence, that's why I would put literature under that category, because I think at its core, it does all the fundamental things that all these other mediums and all these other formats do as well, right? And as an author, I can also vouch for that as well, because it's storytelling as well. So that's also literature. Is also, so will writing a book be the best way to communicate this idea that you have, right? Will writing an article, will writing journals, will doing a newsletter, like what would be the best way for this particular formatting that will make sense to what idea that you have. The other one is digital, and of course we've seen a rise within this, and kind of under digital could fall under the digital and category could be social media platforms, from your Instagram to your TikTok to your Facebook. And I use it specifically within this context because I believe that the future of the digital content is part and parcel of what the future of production and content in itself will be. So I'm of the belief that we need to start taking seriously what we are, as content creators, that what we are putting out within the digital capacity as well. So it falls under its own category. And then the last one that I have, is one that also I think we don't have conversations about enough, and that could be a short form type of content, and that one would categorize social media under it, but I would even go beyond that. Social media short form content, I would even go beyond that by thinking about things like TV adverts, right? Those are 30-second, 60-second type of content of storytelling that needs to be translated, right? That needs to share information, give insight, tell a story, and so it falls under that category as well. So television adverts, things like music videos, those are all productions. Those are all content pieces that communicate a message as well. So when looking and considering what type of content do I want to create, right? What, and then what formatting would make a lot of sense for it within these different formats, right? So I'm going to be unpacking each format within this segment, but I want you to start thinking about, as you're going to be coming back to learn more about these formats, you're going to be thinking about along the lines of what makes the most amount of sense in that kind of capacity. The next question I want you to ask yourself is why, right? Why? Like, why? Why are you doing this podcast? Why are you doing the show? Like, why? I read something from Seth Godin's book called The Practice about how difficult asking the question why, because asking yourself the question why will make you go to places you do not want to go within the conversation. It's like it's kind of like a triggering thing, and it makes you so uncomfortable. So I think it's fundamental for us to ask ourselves the question why. Why am I creating this particular show? Why am I creating this podcast? Why am I creating this film? Why am I creating this short form content? Why am I creating this digital content? Why is, I think, a question that we're not asking ourselves enough. and understanding what the motive for creating the content. And, you know, there are a couple of motives that people could have, right? It could be for brand establishment. You could want to be doing it for brand expansion, right? If you are looking to establish a brand or you're looking to expand your brand and you're wanting to utilize content as a form and as a medium to be able to do that, right? And of course, depending on what format, but in essence, content being the reason why you want to do it, right? Or you want to establish a brand and you're wanting to utilize social media or content or production as a vehicle to for that brand establishment to occur. But also you can, for idea execution or explanation. And if you have an idea, or you are, you know, someone that thinks of things and comes up with ideas, and you think that this idea is meant to be explained or this idea is meant to be executed, then you're prompting whoever you are considering as the executor of that particular idea to do something about it, right? And that particular messaging of that content allows for that to take place. So you can start then thinking about that. Your why could be one of these categories or another category, right? You could be wanting to start yours for a different reason. Some people want to start it, you know, I wouldn't necessarily say want to be famous. I would put that under the category of brand establishment or brand expansion, right? Because you're expanding the more people know about your brand, the more then you are famous. So I would use the term brand establishment or brand expansion instead of being famous. But it really is important to be cognizant of the why, right? Why also, another question being, why is this relevant today? Like, why should it be done now? Why should this message be put out now? Why should this content be put out now? Like, why? And also, why should people know about it? Why should people watch it? Why should people listen it? I think when you're able to answer those questions, then you're able to understand and be clear about the positioning of that particular content piece, because it's clear to why it's being done and being created. So take note of that why. And it's the most difficult one to ask from all these questions, but it's the most important one to ask as well. The next question you should be asking yourself as you're ideating, you haven't began the phases of production, you're still ideating, is to consider who, right? Who is part of the team, or what we'd call in production, the crew, right? And this can also fall under who is going to be either filming the production. And those questions are fundamentally important because it also allows you understanding of how far you can go with the content and all of those types. So who do you want to be on the production? Who will be hosting if it's a podcast? Who will be hosting the podcast? Is it going to be yourself? Why should you be hosting the podcast and not someone else hosting the podcast, right? Like, what makes you the person who should be hosting it? If it's a film, who is the cast? Who are the leads? Who are the people who are going to be involved in this? Who is the creative director or the producer, or who are you thinking would make this particular vision come to life? And as small as a campaign, a social media campaign, this is fundamentally important to be able to ask yourselves these questions as well, right? So who will be part of the team? And I want content creators to start thinking like production, right? And when you are thinking about someone it's not just a video guy, it's a videographer or it's a cinematographer. Like, let's start utilizing and using those terms, because now we start looking and structuring the concept of content creation as an actual industry. And as I said, borrowing from traditional norms of production. So it is a cinematographer, right? It is an editor. It is an AD if there's more than one person kind of filming, or if there's a director, and if that particular videographer or cinematographer is serving both roles of director and producer and location scout, like, those must be defined, that there's also a little bit of respect that we can then give to these individuals, right? Because we've fully understood that their roles, from a production standpoint of view, are fundamentally important. And you don't have to have a big crew, but acknowledging that if this individual is playing more than one particular position, then let's note that down, right? That I can only have 2 people or 3 people in my crew for this particular production. Let's jot all of the responsibilities that they'll be doing from a production standpoint of view. Now we can even start thinking along the lines of when thinking to expand. Now we know the roles that each person's playing. We know, okay, cool. Let's expand and add someone to do, to do another role within the production. So who is part of the crew? Who is hosting the podcast? Who's the cast? Who's the crew? Who are the people in front of the camera? Who are the people behind the camera? Who? Right? So that also helps fundamentally to give context, right? To then how will it all make sense as an idea with these people, right? What I also like to do is noting who are going to be the guests, right? I like writing in ideation. I haven't even began production, but in ideation, I love jotting down potential guests for the podcast or for the show, or potential presenters for a show, potential people that I like that I think would be absolutely incredible for this particular thing. And if it's for, I remember recently producing I produced a podcast for a client of mine. So I was producing this podcast for this client, and I had to put together what I would like to call, and what this encompasses, and I'm going to be sharing a little bit about it in a bit, but this encompasses all of the different facets of these questions, and this document is able to answer all of them. So I then put this together, and I literally put photographs of all the guests that my client was, these potential guests for this client, and we were doing a podcast about finance, and I had put together photographs, bios of all the individuals who were considered as guests, right? And obviously getting those people and that process is another different conversation for another different day, which I will be sharing with you. But it was important for us to know, as we are thinking about this, who would make sense as a guest, who would make sense, who would be communicating what we are trying to do the best way, right? And things like, who are we looking to have as talent, right? And that's the term that we also use as well in production. So think about that as well, right? And also, who are the audience, right? And I love this particular one, and I think in business it's termed who is the target market, right? Like, you can't do a business pitch without knowing who your target market is. Same way in production, I think it would be so valuable for us to know who is our audience for this particular thing before we even begin putting it in production, or creating it. And I see a lot of the times we get frustrated when the people that we are communicating a particular message to are not responsive to the content that we are trying to create, but not being aware that if we had considered initially, before spending all the time and spending all the money and spending all the resources to create this production, knowing who it's for will enable us to be very directive and very intentional about what we are creating and where we are taking it and how we are taking it and why we are taking it and all these other questions, because we know exactly who it's for. So let's start doing audience analysis. Let's start doing audience researching about who we are speaking to and understanding. And I remember I did a course in varsity about audiences. There was a module about audience. And I found that so fascinating, because I think a lot of the times we don't consider the people we are creating the content for. And it's very, very essential that we start doing that and understanding that before we start thinking about where is it going to be, how it's going to be, what it's going to look like, who is it for, enables us then to be able to answer all these other questions, because we know exactly who the person we're trying to serve, where they are, what they like, and then be able to communicate to them effectively. I remember with the same client that I had, the conversation around the who was, we are looking to target individuals who are in varsity, individuals who have just started working and need expert advice and influential information about finances, so that they start making correct decisions about money in the future, right? And it was very clear, university students, young adults who are still grappling with money but are going to be starting to make money decisions in the near future. They're going to start buying houses, buying cars, investing in real estate, investing in stocks, etc. So how are we propelling that particular individual, ensuring that this show is going to be able to answer those questions for them? So that is very important, to know exactly who the person is that we are communicating to, right, as we are considering this particular content piece. The next question we ask ourselves after the who is the where. And we can kind of go into depth with that by understanding where this particular show, this particular content, this particular idea, where does it currently exist? Like, in what realm does it currently exist? Now, that could sound very deep, but like, um, by that I mean, in what kind of like space, in what industry, in what realm, in what country is the core and the essence of this particular content piece at, right? And matching that, of course, where it's trying to then go, right? Like, where is it and where is it trying to go? And that could be in its essence. So in what it's trying to communicate, it's currently here, it's currently at university students, it's currently at young adults, but where is it trying to get to? It's trying to get to these young adults who are then going to travel to becoming financially smart and financially literate individuals, right? So it's trying to go there, and currently now it's currently sitting at in this particular world of finance. It's sitting in the world of not knowing, right? But it's going to transport its audience to knowing, if that makes sense. So we can look at this way from in a dual point, as a duality in itself, and a very interesting one. One would say deep, but really, like, that in itself. But what I think this helps us to do is to then understand where to then distribute this as well. And that's the third way. Where is it currently? Where is it? What world does it exist in? What realm? What industry? What space? Where? In what part of the country? So where does it exist, right? In its audience's minds, is it existing? Are these conversations, is this particular content existing within their minds, or is it something that they're currently practicing, so existing in their world? Like, where does it exist? Where is it hoping to go, or where is it trying to go? As a content piece in itself, is it growing to then expand to these types of audiences, or is it growing to really communicate and take audiences on this particular journey? So where is it trying to go? And also, where physically will the content go, right? So we have traditional formatting or traditional media, and then we have digital media. So you need to be very clear of where you're taking yours. Are you trying to take it digital, so rather traditional? And under traditional, we have television, radio, billboards, newspapers. Cinema, in essence, is still a traditional film viewing experience, right? So where are you wanting this to exist? Like, where? But being able to answer the why and the who, then it would enable you to know where to take it, in order for it to reach the right type of people, in order for it to reach where you are trying to go. Or is it digital? And under digital, it's we have social media, of course, all the various different social media platforms. And I would categorize streaming under digital, because it's a new form and a new medium and it exists digitally. It exists on our phones, on our internet, on our or smart devices. So it is a digital and a new kind of viewing experience for audiences. And then digital platforms with like your YouTube, your Spotify's. And I separate those from social media, because I definitely believe they exist in their own category. According to me, I think an Instagram and a YouTube they serve two different kind of things. Therefore, I would categorize them differently, and not as one. But both of them fall under the category of digital. So where are you trying to take it? For me, very important to have this conversation with myself. And even with the client that I had, with the finance client that I had, it was okay, so where do you want this to go? And he was very distinct about having it going digital, right? According to, and I think it was a workshop conversation, and a very valuable one, because he had said that the audience that is trying to reach are young people. Therefore, we need to understand, where are young people watching, right? Where are university students don't have television sets, right? So there's no TV in res, there's no TV. When one has started working, they might not afford a television set, so they have their phone. So it's very digital, they have social media, so that's where we'll be able to reach them the most. So as we're creating this particular show, we know exactly where it's going to go, even in how we're shooting it, the lighting we're using, the type of mics we're using, like everything, we now are very clear that it's going digital. So we're going to film it like it's going digital. A lot of people don't even know that there are some of these streaming platforms that there are certain requirements for you to in order for you to be able to submit your content to those platforms. It has to be shot in a particular type of way with a particular type of resolution. Therefore, if you have already filmed the show and you didn't know it was going to be going on a digital platform or a streaming platform, and then you get to the streaming platform and they tell you, oh no, we don't accept this resolution. So it was then important for you to be able to know prior to where you wanted to take it, so that you don't have to find yourself getting to that particular platform or trying to go on TV and it's not framed in the right size, and it's just like you filmed it in portrait and it's supposed to be in landscape, and it's just like, yay. Don't do that, okay. Make sure that you are fully aware of where it's going to go before you start filming it. So be in the ideation phase, make sure that you know that information. Okay, that's the way. All right. And the next question you ask yourself is when? When? When is this going to be coming out, right? And when is this going to be making the most amount of sense to the people who are going to be receiving it? And I think the when question is important to then to help us understand the timelines that are going to fall in place. So if I want this to come out in summer of 2024, which is around June here in the US, now I know that I have X amount of months, 6 months to plan for that in advance. If we're talking about, oh, I want this to come up in the next week, now I know that I have at least 2 days to plan filming. And then if I know I want this to come out at this, but then it gives you enough time to plan the production. I always say this to kind of my creative friends, that if you put a date, like just give it a date for the filming of it, like then you start working backwards. So I want it to be filmed on this day, right? We want it to be filmed on this day. You check the weather, if it's on location, like you check all those things, and I want it to be filmed on this day, and then you start working backwards, right? So now you know from this day, this particular content, we need at least this amount of days for it to be edited, and it's going to come out on this day. Therefore, we are setting this date for it to be filmed, and then we are working around that date. So when we're getting guests, when we are considering guests, we know what date to tell the guests to prepare for, right? We know when it's going to make a lot of sense for it to be filmed, and how much time are we going to need for it to be. So that when is very important, to create a framework of when will it make the most amount of sense for this thing to come out. Like, you know what I mean? And then within your timeline, you consider the 6 phases of production that I had mentioned earlier on. And we're going to be diving deep into this in the next couple of weeks. But the timeline, or the phases of production, being pre-production, production, post-production, distribution, and these 2 additional ones that I would like to add is marketing and promotion and redistribution of the content, right? And under that, of course, falls things like licensing it and kind of placing it on different formats and repurposing the content. Like that all falls under redistribution, which happens after it's been distributed to that particular platform, which you would have spoken about and considered from the different kind of distribution models that you can choose, or kind of directions that you can go for. So then you can then start distributing it to all the other ones. And if you're considering to put it here and there, a great example of redistribution, of course, was the Beyonce and Taylor Swift. They had a full-on show, right? There was pre-production, it was fully planned. The production happened, or the show happened. Post the show happened, where photos of the look that she had on stage for that day, like that's all post production, like that's all the stuff. No, I'm that's the next one. Post production is the editing of all of the videos that are going to be going out, and putting the experience at the end of the production. So, but what I wanted to focus on was the redistribution, that the show in itself had occurred, so it had been distributed, but then it went to cinema and it was redistributed as a film, right? So we're repurposing that content again to continue making money out of it, to continue having it reach more audiences, etc. And of course, the marketing and promotion, which is additional new one that I've added to the phases, being and I separated from distribution because I have because of various reasons, and I'll share those later with you guys. But marketing and promotion, it's its own separate phase, and then redistribution. And this really helps us put in context, right, to the relevance of the content, and allow for us to kind of redistribute it again. And I think there are two types of content time frames, or when does it supposed to go out, or why, like the when particular question. There are pieces that are timeless, that and you can think about this as you're thinking and ideating about your show or whatever you're doing. There are timeless pieces that whenever in the world, like, this will make sense in 10 years from now. This content is going to speak to people from in 10 years from now. An example of a timeless piece of content is literature, like literature, a book, information. It will exist for the entire, it's a timeless piece, right? There are films that are timeless, that speak to matters and speak to conversations and speak to stories that are universal and timeless, right? So you must very really consider, as you're creating content, will this conversation, will this make sense in 10 years from now? If not, that's also fine. Then you would fall under the periodic timeline of, and it's gonna make sense now. It's promoted, it's put out now because it's gonna make sense now, and we can't put it out. And a good example of that is vlogs, right? If we went to the Coachella, we want to put out Coachella now, right? It's periodic. It happened now. In 10 years from now, if Coachella doesn't exist, no one's going to think about Coachella. No one's going to know about Coachella. So it's like, why are we going to be watching a video, a vlog of going to Coachella when that's not relevant to us right now? Right? So there are pieces that are periodic, that make sense in that time, in that period, in that phase of life, So that's something to then consider. Like, some timeless pieces of content are amazing, and it also enables redistribution to be a little bit more seamless when you have timeless pieces, right, for conversations and information that will be relevant from now till the future. And then the last question that I will be tackling today is the how, which, after I've asked myself all these questions, I need to ask myself, how am I going to do all of this? I know who I'm speaking to. I know who's going to be on my crew. I know what I'm trying to say. I know what platform or what formatting I want it to be in. I know when it's going to be coming out. I know when it's going to be filmed. I know why and what. And I know all these questions, but now, how? And how, the question is, how will this be financed? That's one you need to ask yourself. How are we going to pay for this child, right? And you could say, I don't need financing for it. I've got my phone, I've got my camera already. So the only financing that I'll be doing is putting in time, and that in itself is fine. I believe there's currency in time, right? So if you're putting in your time, you're putting in your finance, you're paying your time with it. So that's how you're financing it, right? So how will this be financed? And how will it be produced, created, and of course distributed? So how are we, which kind of falls into all the other categories that I did mention earlier on, of the how will it be put together, how will it be produced, how will it be created, how will it be filmed and distributed, Or and then the next one is it how will it make money? And we don't ask ourselves this question. We don't ask this question out to ourselves a lot because it's like it's fun and games, it's just fun, it's just content. No, sweetie. This year we are making the dollar. We are making money from the content that we're creating because we're putting our time. It's not just for fun and games. We now need to start thinking, how are we going to make money out of the content that we're creating? Okay, so let's start in our ideation phase. Let's jot that down. What are the different ways to make money from this type of content that I know what type of content I want it to be. I know I want it to be a television show. How do TV shows make money? You need to know that information. I want it to be a film. How do films make money, right? I want it to be a digital social media something show or campaign or whatever. How am I going to make money out of it? Um, is it literature? How am I going to make money out of the book? Like, what is it that how? And I'm saying these things. I've learned some valuable mistakes from not asking myself this question. And I think it's a very important one because we got to eat, child. We got to pay for the things, right? You know what I mean? Make sure you ask yourself that question. The next question is, how will this make impact? Very important one, right? As we're serving these individuals, how will this show, how will this film, how will this, whatever we're doing, make impact? The most successful productions, shows, films, songs, movies, books are ones that have made a lot of impact on people's lives in one shape, form, or the other. One could say, I listened to the song and I was going through a heartbreak and it soothed my heart, right? I was watching the show. I laughed so hard, I forgot about my problems. Like that's making and creating impact in people's lives. I wrote this book, I was reading this book, and I changed my perspective on how I see the world. You've made an impact. So, how will this make impact? Being aware and being cognizant of what type of impact you're trying to make, and how that impact will then help change the lives of those who are going to be receiving. The next one is, how will it be measured, which is the last one I'm going to be sharing with you today. How will we measure the success of this particular thing? Are we going to measure it on how much money we make from it? Are we going to measure it on how impactful it is? Are we going to measure it on how many countries we're able to reach? Are we going to measure it on how successful or how well known I am as the host, or the crew or the cast is going to be known from it? Are we going to measure it by the awards that we win? Are we going to measure it by how many people watch it? Are we going to measure it by how are you going to measure the success of it so that you know that what I'm doing is actually, you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, you're not just creating for the sake of creating, but you're creating with purpose in that capacity. So that's all I have in store for you today on our Media Mondays. I'm back again next week, of course, to share some valuable media insights and, of course, information that you can take, learn, and, of course, apply in your content creation journey as you're starting from today. Like, I know we have resolutions. I think we must start our New Year's resolutions today, 1st of January. Don't wait till the 10th. You must start today. So get your notebook, get your pen, start your ideation phase of the production. And we're going to be coming back, of course, to speak about the production, the pre-production, the production, the post-production, the distribution, the marketing and promotion, and of course the last one being the redistribution phases of production that you can be fully aware of as you're planning on being the next content superstar. All right, though, have a fantastic day. I'll see you on the next one.